Silver, of course, unlike gold, is not a pure precious metal. It also has industrial uses. So on that side also, the tailwinds are favorable for silver. So if I look at the equity part, that part of it, about half would be in the US. The next biggest allocation, which actually is a big overweight allocation, is Japan. We have Europe, both Europe as a whole, as well as the individual countries. Global diversification. Global means truly global. When I started working, the dollar was 12 rupees and now it's 83 plus. So it's 85% depreciation in the course of a single career. And investing is a loser's game. So you win if you don't lose. Always put risk management first.
We have all heard about the importance of international diversification. But today we have with us someone who has truly applied the principles of international investing in her portfolio. In today's episode of Guru Portfolios, we have with us Devina Mehra, MD and Chairperson of First Global, to tell us about her investments in India as well as her investments all over the world. Hi Devina, welcome to the latest episode of Guru Portfolios. It's really great to have you here. Devina, first off, what's your current asset allocation mix like?
Not that much change, Yash, from last time. So roughly, I would say about 20% in India and 80% global.
And can you give us some more breakup of your global assets?
So global, our strategy is a multi-asset, multi-geography. So it is practically the whole world. So we buy everything from, you can say, South African REITs to Australian mining companies, and it is not only the US for us. So if I look at our current mix, I think we have about 4% in commodities, maybe 18-20% fixed income, and the rest in equities.
And within your global assets, because like you said, it's all over the world, can you give us a further split of across countries? How is it divided?
So if I look at the equity part, that part of it, about half would be in the US. The next biggest allocation, which actually is a big overweight allocation, is Japan. And then, of course, we have Europe, both Europe as a whole, as well as the individual countries. So it's really all over.
And how did your portfolio perform in the past year?
The past year, obviously, India was better. So India was close to 40% returns. The global one was about, I think, 19% or so.
Okay. These are in rupee terms?
These are in rupee terms,
okay.
Yes.
And also, Devina, what about your Indian portfolio? What about the split across mid-cap, small-cap, large-cap?
So the way we look at small cap, mid cap, large caps is not exactly the same definition that SEBI uses for mutual funds. For instance, SEBI doesn't have a guideline for PMSs because our purpose of the classification is risk management. The point is, I do not want to have any disproportionate allocation to below 5,000 crore market cap companies. We do not look at anything below 1,000 crores in the first place. And between 1 and 5,000 also, I think right now we are in single digits. I mean, the maximum we've ever gone to is about 20% or so. Normally we are 13, 14, 15%. Right now we are below that. So that's the skew. So about 25,000 is what we look at as large caps, which is about a little more than half. As per SEBI definition, now because they don't look at market cap bands, they look at top 100, then next 250 and all that. So, the cutoffs are different.
Right. And Devina, what's your view on mid and small caps right now? SEBI had also, pointed out that there is kind of a bubble forming up in that segment. So how are you looking at that space?
As per SEBI definition, again, mid caps are actually fairly large caps. But this below 5,000 crores kind of market cap, I would say, be very careful. And I've been warning about this for a while. I mean, much before SEBI also warned that this could be the frothy end of the market. And there are a couple of other things which people should keep in mind. One, of course, is that in this segment, unlike for large caps, for us, risk management is the cornerstone. So in large caps, for example, stop losses work. In small caps, that doesn't work because when some of those stocks fall, there is no exit. It's just like circuit down, circuit down, circuit down, and you are like gone. Then there are companies which completely disappear. They say, they go into the white blue yonder because if you look at how many companies trade actively in India, it is roughly about 4,000, 4,100. If you look at all the companies that have ever been listed, who've ever had an IPO, the number is far, far larger. It's many times that number. In the 1990s, there were years when you had 1,200 and 1,300 listings. So you can imagine how many companies have just disappeared. And if you look at the history of the small cap, and this is especially relevant because a number of participants in the market are fairly new. They have not lived through all this. So in 2008, the small cap index fell nearly 80%, 78% to be exact. And thereafter, it reached that index level in 2016. But it is also only, it is just theoretical that the index level was reached, because the 2000 index was very different from the 2008 index. It was almost a completely new index. And then 2016 to 18, again, people may not remember, there was a 1.5 year mad bull run in small caps. And again, 2018, there was a 2/3 drop in the index. And also, do not forget your school mathematics that if something drops 2/3, even if it triples, you are at zero. So a lot of micro cap, small cap fund managers or advisors or whoever is now saying that, see, we compounded 50% in the last 2 years or 3 years. But if you look at a 5-6 year period, you'll see a very different picture.
And Devina, coming back to Indian equities on a broader level, what's your view from here, given that elections are coming up, and also we saw quite a bit of volatility in just the last few days?
Right. So my view on a 1-2 year basis remains positive, except, as I said, on the frothy end of the market, which could be the IPOs, small and micro cap kind of category. And the reason, again, I'm very data driven. So if you step back and look at data, we have this thing in mind that Indian equities give you 15-16% compounded return, because that's been the compounded return, say, since Sensex started. But not just on a year-to-year basis, even on a decade-to-decade basis, the variation is very high. So if you had put in 100 rupees in 1980, in 10 years it would have become 700 rupees. If you had put 100 rupees in 2010, in 10 years it became only 230. So instead of 700, 230. So, and 230 was not that different from what you would have got from fixed deposits. So there was a whole decade of subnormal returns. And that gave you that room to grow, which is why, the risk of a big crash is when we are way above the trend line, when the returns have compounded at far above historical rates. You're not there yet. You're not even at the trend line. So that gives me comfort. Yes, there can be volatility in the next few months. And right now, for example, on our PMS, we are hedged. We were hedged in March. We are again hedged. Because to take care of any unforeseen kind of big drop. But the thing is this, if you have a little bit of uncertainty coming up, it makes sense to just buy the hedges but remain invested. It's only when you are pretty sure that there's a crash coming that it makes sense to make a cash call. Because all of us understand that there's a risk of being invested in the market, that you can lose money. But there's also a risk to not being invested in the market. So if you're not invested, means you let go of some potential upside, and that effect can be very dramatic. Because we looked at 40-50 years of data, and we saw that even in 40 odd years, even if you miss out the 10 best days, which doesn't sound like much in 40 years, you miss out on 2/3 of the return. If you miss out on the 30 best days, which is not even 1 day a year, you miss out on 90% of the returns. So 100 rupees in 40 years, instead of becoming 55,000-60,000, is only 5,000-6,000 then. So there is that risk. So whatever is your equity allocation, most times it makes sense to be invested. But since we always manage for risk first, even if we see some uncertainty, we hedge. So that's where we are just now.
But on India, are you overweight right now?
Yes, in our global funds, we'll be overweight India.
Okay. Apart from India, which are the other countries where you're overweight right now?
Japan would be the most overweight. Then there's Denmark, Taiwan. US, we are slightly overweight, not a whole lot, but I think about 1% or so we are overweight.
Okay. But are you more comfortable now on US equities? In the sense, are you more comfortable in terms of the broader rally? How are you looking at US right now?
So US last year, of course, beginning of last year, which is 2023, I was very clear that the US market would go up, which was not at all the consensus then. Because 2022 was a very dramatically bad year, and not just in a manner of speaking, but in actual data, it was the worst year in 100 years in asset markets across the world. So when we started 2023, I was clear that equities would go up. But What happened in the US in particular, even worldwide, the main driver was technology stocks, but in the US in particular, it was a very narrow rally. I mean, NASDAQ obviously is a tech heavy index, but even the S&P for the first 10 months of 2023, nearly 90% of the move was just 7 stocks. So just 7 tech stocks, including Tesla. And so that was a scarier time, because when the market is that narrow, you don't know whether the rally will sustain. But post October, the rally broadened, which of course is also good for our strategy, which is a risk averse strategy. So we will never be that concentrated in our portfolios. But that aside, it is also a good thing for the market. Then the rally looks more sustainable. And now we see that the small and mid cap indices in the US are also looking much better.
And what about US interest rates? Are you expecting them to stay where they are, or you expect some cool off?
Not a cut in a hurry. Again, I have never been in the camp of that the cuts will come soon. If you go back to 2023 beginning, again the consensus was that towards the end of second half of 2023 there'd be rate cuts. I was never of that view. 2024 beginning, the consensus was March the rate cuts would start. Again, I was never of that view, because again you look at historical data, once inflation is that high, it does not come down in a matter of a few months or even a few quarters. It takes years. So there was no possibility that inflation would come down that fast. So you get, certain things which are low-hanging fruit that which come easily. So commodity prices came down after those COVID supply constraints. So that was one easy win. Then housing side, some inflation cooled off. But after that, the inflation has been sticky in the US, particularly the services side, because the services have a large labor component, and the labor market in US has remained tight all through. So now the Fed is also saying, yes, inflation is not moving down the way we thought it would. And so it might, the rate cuts might get pushed out further. That's what it appears like right now.
Right. And Devina, we have seen in the commodity space gold doing pretty well. Of late, the rally has been quite good. But what about you? How are you looking at commodities? How are you playing that space?
So we are, of course, compared to when we spoke last year, we are far lower on commodities. That was mainly because in 2022, there was only one thing which did well in the world in terms of asset classes, which was commodities, and that too really oil. Gold, we have a small allocation, of course. Right now, where we have added, again, not a very large allocation, but where we've added is silver, because we are looking at gold versus silver, and silver now looks as if it will outperform gold. Silver, of course, unlike gold, is not a pure precious metal. It also has industrial uses. So on that side also, the tailwinds are favorable for silver. That's where we have added a bit, but we don't have very large positions in commodities.
And when it comes to debt, how are you positioned there? Are you cutting duration? Are you taking credit calls? Can you give us some insights into that?
Okay, first of all, as a principle in any market, whether it's India or globally, we never take single credit risk, because the whole thinking is that you are getting into fixed income because you want lower risk, and therefore are willing to settle for lower returns. But I find people buy bonds of single companies, which is to me a senseless risk to take, because then you may as well take the equity risk rather than take a debt risk for 1 or 2% point extra return. So we only play with pools. So it is like things like, here it might be a gilt fund. In the global, I think it will be categories. So it will be like, for example, there are ETFs which give you exposure to government debt around the world, or they might be US investment grade, or within US high yield also there are categories. There's things called fallen angels and all that. So we take only pool bets. We again are very systems driven on our fixed income. So we make changes based on our system signals. So right now we are quite low on credit and quite low on duration as well.
And Devina, you have seen so many markets across the world, across market cycles. What would be your 2-3 big points that you think Indian investors should keep in mind when building their portfolio?
One is asset allocation determines most of your returns. First of all, be clear where your assets are currently, and then decide where you want to be. So how much in fixed income, how much in equity, how much in real estate. And part of that asset allocation also is global diversification. So that's also very important, something Indians don't look at, because traditionally you did not have an avenue to invest. Your only way to hedge your currency was gold. Now you have a very generous LRS by which you can invest overseas. So look at that. And global diversification doesn't mean कि you buy a Nasdaq ETF and हो गया. Then that's not what global diversification. Global means truly global. And investing is a loser's game. So you win if you don't lose. So that's the primary thing. So always put risk management first. So for our PMS and for that matter, small case or our global products, everywhere we say that 60% of what you pay is for risk management and 40% is for return management. So that's what I see on a risk adjusted basis. For example, on our PMS, if you look at returns versus volatility or returns versus drawdowns, meaning even temporary losses, there's nobody even close to us because we manage for that. Our systems manage for that. And then, of course, if you do that, at the end of it, your returns also are great.
Right. No, that's a great point, especially on the global diversification, given the fact that Indians now spend so much abroad and rupee has been depreciating, right?
Right.
So
I mean, just to give you statistics, when I started working, the dollar was 12 rupees and now it's 83 plus. So it's 85% depreciation in the course of a single career. So, if you're talking of long-term financial planning, how can you forget this?
Right. No, great. Thanks a lot, Devina. Thanks a lot for joining us today. And I'm sure this conversation will help our listeners to make a more broader and comprehensive and robust portfolio for their investment journey. Thank you.
Thanks for having me, Jash. Pleasure talking.